I'm Derek, and this is Matt, and so as a senior art director at BBDO, I'm responsible for coming up with the kind of creative idea behind the different campaigns that we do. So whether it's for Doritos or for Pepsi brands or whatever accounts, we're kind of working on Harvey's and stuff like that. So if I'm coming up with crazy ideas that are a little bit beyond what the business objectives are for our clients, that's kind of where Matt will come in and say that it's not really aligning so much with kind of what the client wants to do, but it's good that way to keep things on the guardrails. So.
And those guardrails are strategy, which is what I work in.
Cool. All right, so we're here to talk to you today about how to create compelling branded content in film and video production. So who saw this poster? Okay, so it worked. Okay, so that's good. So on this poster, it said that CampusPerks is hosting this free cross-Canada speaker series, and so we wanted to just kind of zoom into the how to create compelling branded content portion of it. So let's just take compelling branded content and break it down into some parts here, just so we can kind of talk about it as we get into it. So branded content has been around for a while. And it's been around since even before 1957, but 1957 was when a fairly significant piece of branded content happened. Can everyone hear me? Okay, yeah? Okay, not super well in the back, okay. So, is this better? It's kind of weird to like lean in, but okay. So this was the original soap opera. So the original soap opera was created by Procter & Gamble back in 1957, that evolved into the soap operas that everyone is, well, I don't know how many people here watch soap operas, but like everyone knows what a soap opera is. So, and then fast forward to 2012, which is when Felix, and I can't pronounce his last name, jumped out of the space capsule for the Red Bull Stratus project, and a little bit different, obviously, than soap operas back in the 1950s. So.
So I want to talk about what is the opportunity right now with branded content. And believe it or not, this wheel is the world right now. The way to think about this is you're the yellow dot in the middle there. And as advertisers, we've got used to this world where we're used to interrupting you. You probably feel it. It's inconvenience more than it is entertainment. And you've got better than ever at avoiding it. So whether that's skip ad on YouTube, or that's looking at your iPad when you're watching an ad on TV, or there's studies that have shown that people actually tune out the right-hand third of a screen because they're so used to seeing ads there that they don't even know what's there. Fast forward to what the future could look like. So again, you're the yellow dot here. And the basic idea is that as advertisers, we come up with something that is at the root of it entertaining. It's something that's worth watching. And this amazing thing happens then. All of that avoiding turns around, and you don't just not have time for 30 seconds anymore. You now have time to watch 30 minutes. Or with that 30 seconds, it's enjoyable, so it's something that you end up sharing out. And I think, it's not just branded content, I think it's the future of advertising. But we're talking about branded content today, so that's kind of the world. So before we go too far into this idea of branded content, let's explore something. Let's talk about the brand and what branded content is. So here's a definition. It's a little bit wordy. Brand identity is tangible, and it appeals to the senses. It fuels recognition, amplifies differentiation, and makes big ideas and meaning accessible. So the basic way to think about it is this. At its core, branding is all about storytelling. And it's storytelling that goes on for years and years and years. If you think about Mercedes, it was invented way back in the 1930s. It's been telling stories ever since then, and it's evolved and it's changed, but it's all about telling the story of Mercedes. There are a bunch of things that come into what makes that story. First one is behavior. So brands are able to act, they're able to do things. Not such a nice example, but the BP oil disaster, that was definitely a brand acting in a certain way, and for better or for worse, it said something about them as a brand. Visual. So David's Tea, I was reading about David's Tea today. Just actually won one of the top brands of the year. And I think they have such a lovely visual identity that you see that aqua, right?
It's like a turquoise aqua seafoam, yeah, like something like that.
Art director skills.
Yeah.
They have this aqua sign that's just so recognizable, and the look and feel of the stores. You just walk in there and you know the David's Tea story. The messaging. So this is where Derek and I come in a lot. It's about the messages that we put out there, whether it's through advertising or it's through PR, whatever it is. People. So do you guys know about Nest? Have you heard of Nest? It's this smart thermostat. It was invented by a guy called Tony Fadell, who has been called the father of the iPod. And that association between him as a brand and Nest, it's done so much for the brand. Everyone's looking at this Nest thermostat as the evolution of a thermostat that's credible because of this person that's involved with it. And the last one here is associations. So the way I think about this, I go back to when I was a teenager growing up in England, and David Beckham first came onto the scene. And he had these amazing football boots. They were by Adidas, and they had these little rubber spikes on the inside of the foot. And I'd never considered Adidas football boots until I saw David Beckham playing in these Adidas football boots. And he had this ability to curve the ball that just gave so much authority to what Adidas was selling that it was all I wanted. My mum would never pay for it, and I'm doing this, and I'm not a footballer.
So this is Nike.
Or Nike.
Or Nike, yeah. So so when you see this logo or this brand, what would you might associate with this? Just do it, right? That's kind of like the famous big tagline. So when we talk about brands, kind of internally and also externally, we actually associate them with kind of human things. So if we move on to kind of Nike, we go, Nike is kind of it's kind of aggressive and the pursuit of personal excellence. So that's kind of what Nike stands for. So Nike is a massive brand. And let's go into the next one. We're going to talk about, just for a second here, why a brand's identity is important. So obviously it's important for a brand to have a logo and to have a voice out there, but it's carefully constructed over time. So as Matt was talking about with Mercedes kind of has been going on for almost 100, probably like almost like 100 years, and it's so over time it's kind of builds value and builds kind of credibility. And ultimately money. So it's actually worth like a ton of money. So if we look at Nike, or Nike, when it was first created, this logo was actually, it cost $35. This was back in 1971. And this is a really iconic logo. But back then, the brand would have just been an idea on paper. It would have been like, hey, let's start this shoe company, and it's going to be all about achieving personal excellence and being aggressive and like reaching your goals and like just doing it and all this stuff. But at the time, the brand might have only been worth a few $100, or in this case, right when the logo was created, a hard cost might have been like $35. But then you fast forward to today, and the brand's worth $17 billion. So it's crazy that over that amount of time, it's not actually a lot of time, but 1971 to 2013, a brand can grow that much in value from just like an idea and a $35 pencil sketch into this $17 billion brand. So a lot goes into that, obviously. So there's a lot to lose if you mess it up. So let's talk about also why else a brand's identity is important. So Microsoft and Apple are two totally different brands, but they live within the same space. And a really important thing to talk about in terms of brand and why branding is important is market differentiation. So you've got Apple on the right, which everyone kind of, how many people have iPhones here? Okay, so a lot, okay. So everyone kind of knows what Apple stands for, and they already have this kind of formulation of what Apple means in their head, and they kind of know what Microsoft stands for, which is definitely the things that Apple doesn't stand for, right? So, it really, branding helps to guide how we're going to talk about the brand in advertising and marketing and even products, and then the consumer will then form expectations. So we'll all form expectations about the brand, which can help to simplify the purchase decision. So when you go buy a phone, you're not really thinking, is it going to be Apple or Microsoft? Although Android's kind of in the mix now, but your head is kind of already wrapped around the idea of what Apple already is. So you're kind of already in that kind of Apple mindset. So, and then the marketing communications would be something else that would be informed by the brand, and then ultimately, as I talked about, the purchase decision. So, and then I'm just going to play an ad. I think so. Does everyone remember this campaign from back in the day? So really cool campaign, and I think it really talks about differentiation between Apple and Microsoft in a very clear way. So.
Hello, I'm a Mac.
And I'm a PC.
Oh, hey, iPod. Nice.
Yeah, it's just a little something to hold my slow jams.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, and it works so seamlessly with iTunes.
You should check out iMovie, iPhoto, iWeb, because they all work like iTunes. You know, iLife. Comes on every Mac.
iLife. Well, I have some very cool apps that are bundled with me.
Well, like, what do you got?
Calculator.
That's cool. Anything else?
Clock. Clock.
Sounds like hours of fun.
Yeah.
Or at least minutes.
So that's kind of like an immediate, like you can tell very clearly what Apple stands for and what Microsoft stands for. So no one in this room really cares if their phone has like just clock on it. So it doesn't really matter. So there's a lot to lose, obviously, when you have a brand that's really big and worth a lot of money. And Matt's going to take you through a little bit about why that should be maintained. So.
Okay, so the brand we're going to talk about is Tropicana. First, I'm going to play a TV spot here.
For the grayscape, gets in his car and drives her away, far from all the things that we are. Puts on a smile and breathes it in and breathes it out. He says bye 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 to all of noise.
So does that feel like Tropicana? What kind of things does it make you think about when you think about Tropicana? Joy? Yep. What's that? Yeah,
it's awesome.
It's an awesome TV spot. Yeah. I mean, it was a BBDO spot that our agency produced, but it's a great TV spot. The words that we associated with it was wholesome, so not from concentrate, grove to glass, sunshine 365 days a year. That's the whole point of the TV spot. Premium, highest quality from freshly picked oranges, and traditional, that lovely line, brighter mornings for brighter days. And I think that comes through in the packaging that whoever came up with putting a straw in an orange was smart. I mean, if you're talking about communicating that it's right from the grove, it's perfect. It's exactly where it's from. So a couple of years ago, Tropicana did something. They did this with their package, and I mean, as an art director, it's not a bad design.
It's a very clean design. I mean, it's more modern. It's got kind of a more modern typeface to it. I'm sure I could probably go on for like 5 minutes about why it's more modern and like more in line with today's design aesthetic and that kind of thing. But there were effects to that.
Do you think that it says what we were just talking about, like wholesome and from the grove? I mean, I really like that orange with a straw in it. I think it's such a clear icon of what it means, and you've kind of lost that.
And this also, like this glass looks nice and the orange juice looks nice in it, but it doesn't necessarily say that it's straight from the grove, and it could be maybe from concentrate, and it gets a bit confusing. So
yeah, and I guess one of the big points that we want to take away from all of this is that branding, it's an opportunity. It's storytelling and it's assets that brands have, and you can really play into that and use it to your advantage, I think, to make better content. So the effect of this was it ran, and they saw a 20% drop in sales, and actually ended up switching back to the old can.
Yeah, cool. So I could talk about compelling for the compelling part of branded content. And so compelling content is making something with value or something that you'd actually want to watch or use. So when we're talking about branded content can kind of be utility, or it can be entertainment, or it can be a little bit of both, but usually it has to, or by definition, it actually has to kind of do something for you other than just sell a product, right? So So we have some cool examples here. Does everyone know who Gordon Ramsay is? And does everyone know that Gordon Ramsay, you know Gordon Ramsay?
I know Gordon Ramsay.
Well, not like personally, but like, well.
He's a footballer.
He's a footballer, yeah. Okay. So Gordon Ramsay is a Michelin 3-star chef. So does everyone know like the Michelin rating system for like restaurants and like chefs and stuff? So that actually came from this original Michelin guide that was from this one's from 1929. And as we know it today, it's kind of like the Michelin guide for restaurants all around the world, right? So this thing was created. This kind of brochure was created in 1929 as kind of a guide for people in France to drive all around the countryside with their cars and use up the tires on their cars, which was because it was Michelin, but to actually explore different restaurants and kind of towns all around France and check out some really cool food. And so that was a really kind of early piece of branded content that was presented by Michelin, but it was really about going and exploring food in France. So I'll just play a clip here.
The country's biggest selling bar laundry soap brings you the guiding light.
Pretty cool organ. So this was the example from 1937 from Procter & Gamble of the original kind of soap opera, and so they basically started this thing called the guiding light that came on in the afternoon to help entertain housewives at home, and it was brought to you by Procter & Gamble, and it was like these kind of pieces of content and these stories of kind of drama and love and romance and stuff that eventually that same theme continued into the video version of soap operas that we all watch every day, right? So no, I'm joking. But yeah, so that was kind of, at that time it was weird for a brand to put out a piece of content on radio that wasn't just straight up advertising. And it really helped with sales and also helping people understand what Procter & Gamble were all about. So another example, has anyone here ever seen The Hire, like the BMW film series at all, or no? So this came out a while ago, and The Hire was a pretty compelling piece of content because it provided entertainment through an excellent cast and storyline. So a bunch of films were produced for BMW, and BMW actually created like a little thing called BMW Films, which is pretty cool. And Guy Ritchie directed one of them. Does everyone know Guy Ritchie? Did Snatch and did Lock, Stock and stuff. So I'll play a clip from one of the movies that Guy Ritchie made for BMW Films for The Hire. And it actually helped to launch Clive Owen's career. Well, I know
in America.
In America, so Clive Owen was already big in the UK.
Derek just didn't know about it.
I didn't know that,
Yeah.
But it helped to launch his career actually in the US as well. And the cool thing about this too is that the BMW car wasn't it was integral to the storyline, and it wasn't kind of like this afterthought. So it was really cool to see a vehicle be used as a vehicle for storytelling. So
the first thing you notice physically about this lady is her eyes. Bright blue eyes. It's rare to actually see those eyes because they're usually covered up, but when you do, it's worth it. The next thing you notice is her hands. Strong, powerful, yet feminine hands. But the real heart-stopper that this woman has in her galaxy of talents is her voice. Her billion-dollar voice. She's a legend in her lifetime. She's achieved giddy heights few have equaled. She's unrivaled in her world. And she's a complete cunt.
Glenn!
Right here, darling. I'll be right back.
Glenn, get over here.
Hey, Glenn is flying in. Glenn is here to say you are the bomb.
Idiot. You are such a moron. This is not what I pay you for.
All right.
Glenn, a manager for 7 years. No backbone on the man.
Not a problem, sweetheart. We will work it out, okay?
But he gets paid enough not to have one.
Coffee. I want my coffee! better not be cold.
Piping hot.
I'm so over black.
So this is the part here where she gets into this BMW M5, and then Clive Owen is like the driver, and then drives her to her venue. But for this piece of content, the car wasn't really mentioned at all in the beginning. I think this is probably about a minute and a half clip there. And so the car does become central to the story of getting her from this parking garage to her venue. But it definitely felt, BMW. It felt gritty. It felt, sexy and cool. And there's a great result from this, which is that BMW sales saw a spike of 12% the year after that were directly attributed to the BMW films. So it was really great to put content out there that wasn't just advertising in your face, but actually entertaining. So.
So the next one here is another Nike example. I think it was one of you at the front here that said, when you think of Nike, you think of Just Do It. So this is Make It Count, which I think is an evolution of the idea of Just Do It. I'll play the clip.
Definitely make this flight, but we're cutting it close. So far the trip is off to a fairly irresponsible start. And so it begins.
So it's just a quick clip. The video goes on for about another 4 minutes, and just in the interest of time, we cut it down. He goes all around the world, and he runs out of money eventually and ends up going back. How many of you guys had seen that before? Did you know the director Casey Neistat, the guy that made it? I think this is just a really cool example of where the brand of him as a director and the brand of Nike came together in this way that I just think is so perfect. So when you think of Make It Count, he's a guy that I think lives that as his personal brand. Regardless of Nike, he was already doing that. He's a director who does this kind of thing all the time. He's a bit rough and ready. He edits on iMovie and he just uses quick cuts. But it's just such a nice example of someone using the brand as an asset. So he's taken the story of Nike and everything they've built for all these years, and he said, how can I apply that to me? And how can I tell a story that relates to that? And he's done his own thing. It doesn't feel like an ad. The next example here was something that they did a few months later.
We bought our tickets at the airport. We planned nothing. Because when nothing's for sure, anything can happen.
So the story here is that when he did that original video, the Nike Fuel Band didn't exist. And I don't know if you noticed, I don't know if it was in our clip, but at the start they do have a product shot of it and then it goes into the story. This came out a few months later after the Nike Fuel Band was released, and they revisited the exact same story and basically inserted a lot of shots of the Fuel Band within it. And I think both of us, when we watch it, the risk with that is that it felt too much like an advert. It wasn't telling an original story. It wasn't revisiting it in a way that added to the story. It is a good ad, I think, for the story in the first place. So if you treated it that way, it could have been an ad for the original documentary, whatever you want to call it. But in the end, it just felt like it was kind of branded content dressed up more as an advert.
Yeah. So yeah. So with this one here, like you saw at the end, there was a lot of edits of like the Nike Fuel Band, obviously, and you kept seeing that. And then there's that one shot where he's doing this out the window, and he's got like the Nike Fuel Band on again, and then he's got it on when he's like writing on the thing. So it's a really cool commercial, and I would call that more of an ad. But because they're trying to pass it off as branded content, it kind of feels a bit weird because you feel like I'm being advertised to every 4 cuts kind of thing, versus the original one was more like, hey, I'm aligned with Nike's, just do it, and I'm going to go out there and take the money that I was supposed to spend on this commercial and go all around the world and just have fun and just make it count. So
yeah, it's nothing about the creative itself. I mean, it's well put together. It's just the story. It wasn't really branded content. It's not to say that you can't integrate the product into branded content. So Derek introduced this whole idea by saying that there's this idea of utility. And this is a really cool example of how Nike used that to their advantage. So this is some of the London Underground system. And they've mapped out all of the subway stations and told you how many fuel points you can get if you walk instead of taking the subway. And it's cool. I mean, it's an actual useful thing. You can figure out if I've got to get to that goal today, I can do it. Yeah,
and I like this example too because although we're talking about branded content and storytelling in more of like a video way with this particular presentation, it's really important to remember that your video or your piece of branded content or your ad will always exist within a bigger ecosystem, and that's part of kind of our job being at kind of agency level is to make sure that one video fits in with that longer storytelling. And so we just wanted to show a cool example of branded content that's a bit more utility based that would still fit within the same strategy of what Nike's trying to do, which is like make it count or just do it or get your personal ambitions done for that day. So cool. And so has anyone ever heard of Red Bull Media House? No? Did anyone hear of a movie called The Art of Flight? It's like a snowboarding movie, like all slow motion. It was like really well cut. Yeah. So that was produced by Red Bull Media House, and Red Bull has basically created this kind of multi-platform media company that's been an extension of their brand, and they've focused on sports, culture, lifestyle, and there's a kind of a wide range of like media. So it's like whether it's like films and releases to amazing YouTube videos that consistently go viral. Partnerships with like GoPro and stuff like that, and it goes all the way from like TV, mobile, digital, print, and it appeals to a global audience. So it's still in line with Red Bull, but it's actually creating all this content, all this branded content. And this was kind of their famous big piece, which was when Felix jumped out of the little space pod from like the edge of space. And did everyone tune into that, or was everyone kind of like check it out before or after, or like was really like interested in this? So this was carried on nearly 80 TV stations. So I think probably the largest consumption was probably on YouTube and online and like on Twitter and stuff like that. But it was also piped out to 80 TV stations in 50 different countries. And the live webcast went through 280 digital partners and racked up 52 million views. So it was actually the most watched live stream in history. Like it was bigger than like any concert that YouTube had done, and it's kind of like the whole world tuned in to watch this. So I think it was really big. And it's interesting to think about Red Bull is now a publishing empire that also happens to sell a beverage, versus Red Bull is a beverage company that makes some content, right? They've kind of, if you really think about it, they've done this huge flip to actually create all this content, and you've almost started to forget that they also have this product called Red Bull. It's more like, I want to get into like the Red Bull lifestyle, right? So
they're actually separate companies as well.
Yeah. So Red Bull Media House is a separate company from Red Bull, but it definitely follows that same vein of what the brand stands for. But they're able to just go nuts and create tons of content. So
that's in keeping with the brand story, right?
Yeah.
They're creating something that makes sense coming from Red Bull.
Yeah. And also, if Red Bull gave you wings and then you jumped out of the space capsule, then technically you would fly. So actually, maybe there's.
He obviously didn't have.
He didn't fly, so yeah. So but he didn't have a Red Bull before he jumped. So.
No.
So in conclusion, make content, make it great, and to leverage the brand. Because when you leverage the brand and you do things that are aligned with the brand, you already have the power of kind of all that credibility that the brand's built up, and you can kind of echo that and keep moving it forwards.
Think of it as inspiration. I mean, you can think of brands, and it's pretty easy to think about what they stand for, and you can really use it as a stepping stone to get you to some really great places, I think.
Yeah.
think it'll be pretty fun.
So we thought that we would end things off, since this is all about brand identity and branded content, by showing you an opportunity where you can kind of stretch your creative muscles and create some own branded content of your own. The opportunity is called Crash the Super Bowl, and it's put on by Doritos, and it's your chance to create a 30-second commercial for Doritos with the opportunity to have it as the grand prize air during the actual Super Bowl, win $1 million as you saw there, and also work on the set of Marvel, The Age of Ultron, the Avengers movie, which is really exciting. So that said, I hope you guys learned something from the presentation, and you can find everything that you need on Doritos.com to enter the Crash the Super Bowl contest and get started creating your 30-second commercial. And what's really awesome about the opportunities is the first year that it's actually available to Canadians to enter too. So with that, did you guys want to have some Q&A?
Yeah.
Great.
Any questions?
So I guess my question is, as a strategic planner, do you deal kind of with the production houses in order to make these marriages between brands and, say, movies happen? Or?
That's not specifically my role. So I come in much earlier in the process. That would actually be more Derek, working with the production teams that we have.
Yeah, so we would, if we were coming up with, the question was, at what, as a strategic planner, is Matt involved with connecting the production companies or the production houses with the brands and with the idea behind what a spot might be? Is that right? Okay. So, so typically the ads that we would create at BBDO or in an advertising agency would be conceptualized by myself as an art director and a copywriter. That's kind of like the classic Mad Men example of it. Sometimes though, I work with Matt, and Matt will come up with ideas as well, and I might work with like account people as well to come up with ideas kind of internally. And then we will present this to the client, and the client will sign off on idea A or B or C, and then we will reach out to the production companies at that point to say, we want to create this 30-second commercial, or we want to create this 1.5-minute piece of branded content, and then we'll get bids coming in from different production houses to kind of say, this is our director, this is how he's going to approach the treatment, he or she, and then we would go ahead and get client approval and then go and make the spot. So that's kind of the traditional process around that. But the landscape is definitely changing as well. And for this example with Doritos, it's like they're handing over, everyone can kind of submit their commercial idea and then it can potentially be made. So
with the ever-changing landscape, how do you ensure for your clients that you're keeping very innovative and ensuring that your content is different?
Yeah, that's a great question. I definitely actively read
What was the question?
Oh yeah, I have to repeat it, right? Okay. So how do we stay on top of being innovative and doing work that is innovative for our clients? And how do we stay on top of that, right? Is that just the question?
I think before you say from a technical standpoint, I think part of that lies on my shoulders about keeping brands relevant for what's going on. So we need to make sure that our brands are communicating in a way that makes them differentiated from other things that are going on, and that means evolving. So you see it with McDonald's, that they're evolving with the marketplace, being more health conscious. That is fundamentally a strategic decision that then became an executional thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then in terms of keeping kind of on top of what is innovative, I think you just have to be passionately curious, right? So for me, it's checking out crazy bits of technology. I just saw something this morning on Wired magazine. I don't know who reads Wired magazine or checks out Wired online, but there was these little self-assembling robots that had these little servo motors in them, and they had magnets, and they were these little cubes, and these cubes would spin around, and they could actually turn assemble into little shapes. And so that has nothing to do with advertising, but it's something that I was that's just really badass. And,
not yet. I mean,
Not
one
yet,
day
not
there'll
yet.
be a time.
Yeah. So I think it's just being really curious and staying on top of what is kind of out there, kind of in the future, and then sometimes those kind of crazy things can make their way into our thinking, and then into the work for our clients. So maybe we'll see like a self-automated robot ad like in like 2 years or something. I don't know. Does that answer the question? Yeah.
So how do I see the strategy planner role in Canada? So I think it's in a bit of a state of change right now. There used to be two distinct roles in an agency, a digital strategist and an account planner. And a brand account planner's job was about defining the brand and about assigning that personality to a brand and making sure that we stay true to that. And a digital strategist was more involved with the execution of things, like what is the purpose for being online and what is the purpose for being on social media. And for a bunch of reasons, I think because digital is now such an integral part, it's not just another medium, it's an integral part of coming up with ideas. You need to be able to do both. And I think budgets are getting tighter, so there isn't really the money to have two people doing these jobs anymore. So for me, at my stage in my career, it's important to be considering both.
So the question was that our industry is very cutthroat, and is there any ways to set yourself up to get into a position that we're in, or any position within like an advertising agency, right? So yeah, I think it really comes down to your portfolio as a creative. So you've got to start by thinking, what is the stream that I'm going to go into? Am I going to be a creative? Do I want to actually come up with like the ideas from a creative standpoint, or do I want to do something more like what Matt does, which is more like guiding the brand and like the overall strategy? And then you have other roles like producers that might just, if you really like getting stuff done and you like working in a really fast-paced environment, then you would work with the creatives and with some of the planners, some of the account people and the clients to make a website come to life from basically a napkin sketch, right? So that's a really cool role as well. And I think it does come down to your portfolio if you're a creative. If you're creating like really interesting ads that are kind of not normal. I look at books all the time from interns, and sometimes I see ads in there that look like they're just like these one-off print ads, and that's not really the way that kind of campaigns function now. They're very 360. There'll be digital stuff, there'll be social stuff, there'll be print stuff as well. And I think it's, if you can think in that way and come up with ideas, like big ideas that can go across different media, that would definitely give you, I think, an advantage. So.
For me, I think one of the biggest things is to be curious, to ask the question why, almost insanely. I ask myself why 1 million times a day. And the other thing, someone very clever once said to me that it's about defining what success is and constantly thinking about that. So there's a difference between a cute ad and an effective ad, and that is the focus on why you're doing it in the first place.
Yeah, and I think also it's also like really hard work. So after this presentation, I actually have to go back to the office and keep working until about 10 o'clock tonight on a, so I think you have to be ready to work really hard, and you have to be willing to go really deep. And there's like the 10,000 hour rule. Has anyone ever heard of that before? Where if you do 10,000 hours or something, then you become an expert. So a lot of my schooling is kind of self-taught, and I just remember spending like hours in high school up until like 3 a.m. on Photoshop and learning how to like edit movies and stuff like that, and I think that helped me to get to me to where I am today. Was just spending all those hours and all that exposure and making tons of mistakes along the way. So it's just like hard work, I guess, mainly as well. Yeah, sure. It's good. It's good.
So I mean, from experience, creativity needs, I guess, appropriate environment.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's not the office space, sometimes it's not a meeting room. So how do you ensure that you have creative juices flowing? How does BBDO help foster that environment for you?
Yeah.
If you're working kind of 9 to 5 or you're working set hours, like, ensure that you can be able to be creative.
So how does BBDO foster an environment that allows us to be really creative and not just kind of get locked into like the 9 to 5 kind of environment, right? So yeah, our offices are kind of a mix of like totally open concept and kind of half open concept, which I think is pretty cool. I'll be at my desk and I'll be working on something, and if Matt walks by and he sees that I have something up on like a presentation board next to my desk, he might be curious and walk in and say, hey, like, what are you working on? Oh, I'm working on this campaign for Harvey's. And Matt, who doesn't necessarily work on Harvey's, might say, okay, this looks interesting, like, can you explain this to me? And we might get into a discussion for 10 minutes, and I might say, hey, I'm actually having a problem with the way that this piece is working. And Matt will just kind of give his 2 cents on it, and we'll kind of cross-pollinate. Or I'll walk by Matt's area and kind of, pop my head in and say, hey, what's up? And we'll talk about it. So I think it's like office layout is kind of I think really key, at least on our floor, for kind of popping in and talking. And then I think it's also allowing for like unstructured time. So meetings happen all day, and there are meetings that happen back to back sometimes from like 9 a.m. to like lunch, and then you have like half an hour, you run outside, you come back in, and keep working again in meetings. I think it's really important to like meet up after work, go get a beer, or go get a coffee or something like that, and talk about things outside of the office environment, because sometimes that can get very like regimented. And I think that ideas come from anywhere, and there's always like the classic saying of coming up with new ideas in the shower, but that actually happens. Like I'll be getting ready to work, like for work in the morning, I'll have a meeting at 9:30, and as I'm getting ready for work, I'll actually be like still kind of thinking about some of the problems I'm trying to solve, and I'll if I crack something, I'll like jot it down on my iPhone.
Yeah, I mean, it's also about not pressuring yourself. I mean, you've probably been there, you're looking at a computer and you're thinking in terms of linear time that I have to get this finished by X time.
Yeah.
And you've got to be willing to accept that sometimes you're just not going to be able to get it done right that second. Not to say you're not going to meet your deadline, it's more a willingness to step away and appreciate that the future version of you is going to be capable of solving that problem.
Yeah.
And that's scary at first, but
Like I don't solve all of the campaigns that I'm working on in the first hour that I'm sitting down thinking about them, right? It's like I might sit there for an hour on a Tuesday, and if my head's not in the right space, I know, okay, that the juices aren't flowing and the ideas aren't coming, and so shut the book and work on something else, or get something else done that's more of like a routine task, and I'll come back to that later when I'm after a coffee, or maybe I'll work on that tonight at like 7 p.m. when I feel like the day's tasks have been taken care of. So
Or read about robots.
Or like I'll read about robots, and then I'll go, oh my god, robots, TV, okay. So.
What did you guys study in school, and like how did you get to where you are? Like what kind of career path, I guess, you followed?
So the question was, what career path and what schooling did we do to get where we are? So mine was pretty linear. I went to the University of Guelph, and I took marketing there, so I did a Bachelor of Commerce degree, and it was quite a research-heavy degree, so I had quite an early interest in learning about research methods, that type of stuff, which works really well as a strategic planner. And then I got a job working as an account person in advertising. So that's the person that deals with the client on a day-to-day business. Frankly, they're the people that keep the lights on. They're the ones that really make the advertising happen and keep everybody on the straight and narrow.
Front lines, basically. Front
lines, yeah. And I did that for a number of years, and then I begged somebody to let me have a chance at moving over into strategic planning, and the begging didn't work, so I paid the money, and here I am. No, the begging worked.
Yeah. And I take, a more like non-traditional approach. So I went to a high school called Marshall McLuhan here in Toronto, up at Avenue at Eglinton, and they had like a Macintosh computer lab where they had all those like shiny blue Macs, and they had like iMovie on them, and we had like mini DV cameras, and so it was kind of like a media forward school. And so I was like running around with these cameras and like learning Photoshop in grade 9, which was Photoshop 5, I think, and Flash just came out, so Flash is almost like come and gone, but so I was really passionate and curious about media at that time. Probably learning about Marshall McLuhan was also influenced me as well. And after high school, I took a little bit of time off, and I worked on a lot of personal projects, and I was kind of thinking like, how am I going to go out there and make money and play with media? I can either be like a video installation artist, or I can go into advertising. So I decided to go into advertising, and the way that I did that was I worked just on like kind of personal work, and then my personal work got me recognized by a staffing agency, and the staffing agency started placing me at kind of different short-term and long-term contracts. So I worked for a lot of agencies at that time, and it would be like 3 months here, maybe like a 2-week kind of like Navy SEAL mission here, and then sometimes like six months somewhere. One of those turned into a full-time opportunity, and then from there I just went from 1 year, 2 years here, and my career's taken me to all the way from here. I've worked a little bit in London, in California at a place called Juxt Interactive, and then also in Boston for a bit. So, yeah. So once you kind of get the ball rolling and you start getting recognized and your work starts growing, then you can have that kind of portfolio and you can stand on that work and say, here's all the stuff I did for all these clients at these agencies, and then they can trust you and say, okay, well, we see that you did that, so you can probably do that here. So. Cool. Any more questions?
As a creative, what would you say is the most, or the few are the most essential, like, things to know? So, like Photoshop, what types of programs or utilities should a person know if they're getting to the creative field?
Yeah. So the question is, what are the essential programs or the essential things to know if you're a creative getting into the field, right? So I would almost say that that Photoshop matters in terms of like execution, but I spend most of my day in like text edit and or like PowerPoint, and PowerPoint sucks, right? But it's actually a really cool program to use to get your thoughts out there. And so we're kind of always obsessed with decks. So today was a deck we were going through, and we're kind of presenting to you the idea of how to create compelling branded content and what's that story today. But I'll spend a lot of time literally just kind of like thinking and writing and doodling and that kind of thing. Because if it's not a strong idea, a really strong execution can't really hide kind of like a really weak idea. So you've got to spend a lot of upfront time coming up with a really great idea first. And then when you get into the execution phase of things, it definitely helps to understand like art history a little bit, or design sensibilities. So that might be like typography, and then the programs might be Photoshop, Illustrator, InDesign, those kind of things if you're more visual. But if you want to get into advertising as a copywriter, you don't technically need to know all the visual-based programs. You just need to know how to come up with ideas and be a really good writer. And then you can work with other people that might know those programs a little better. So, does that answer the question? Yes. Get off the computer. Any more questions?
You talked about more of like the experiential branding and like with the propaganda and like T-Mobile, those types of commercials. And they have been coming out on a pretty regular basis now, almost an overload. Mm-hmm. Do you see new trends that are starting to come in as far as new ways of trying to get above the majority of people starting to come in and try to tackle experiential advertising? And how are you going to get above it?
I think it comes down to the question. Do I see there any trends in the way that people are doing these type of experiential marketing campaigns? So I think it comes back to a fundamental question: is why you're doing it, and you have to be really honest about that. And I think that you don't see it necessarily as a campaign. You see it as a piece of content that should stand on its own. So the T-Mobile you're talking about, is that the flash mobs? With the yes.
Like when it came out, it was amazing, right?
But now it's like flash mob, flash mob, flash mob, flash mob.
Yeah, that's turned into a bit of an advertising campaign. I would say when that first came out, that was true branded content, and it was this really innovative thing that you just wanted to share to everyone, your grandma, your mum, your friends, everybody. But they've started to look at it not so much as focusing on it as a piece of content that has value in itself, and they've started to see it more as a creative idea that they're trying to expand to other things. So I think, the same's true with Tropicana. I don't think they would keep doing that. I think that was a one-time, this is a really valuable idea, and let's stay true to that, and let's embrace the fact that it is just good content for the sake of good content. And I think we're starting to see people kind of hold on to that a little bit more, and just focus on that single-minded good idea in the first place.
And I know for me, when I come into the office every day, one of my mantras is like, okay, don't make advertising today. And so, like, I know I'm making advertising, and I work at a pretty large advertising agency, but I try to really create things that people want to see or want to share or want to interact with. So a big trend that I might see right now would be like branded utility. A good example of that would be Charmin, which is a toilet paper brand, right? Did an app called, I think it's called Sit or Squat, and it was an app specifically in the States and specifically in New York, where you could look at all the public restrooms in Manhattan, and it would tell you like which ones were good for sitting and which ones were good for like squatting. And that's really cool, because that's like a real problem, that if you're a tourist or maybe you're out and about and you're between your house and your office or whatever, and you need to find a washroom, you can actually open up this app and it'll tell you where you are. It'll show you the best rated washrooms around you, and probably none of those washrooms use Charmin as the toilet paper, but it's just really nice to know that a brand kind of has your back, or your bum, but like, that's kind of a cool branded experience. I think that it starts to kind of take a step away from like the classic advertising example. So.
It's kind of exciting. It's nice.
Yeah. So answer the question?
Yeah.
So the Coca-Cola ad with all the video cameras, the security cameras, would that be a branding over an advertisement? Do you know the one?
Yeah.
That would be a branding then, or?
So the question is, there's a Coca-Cola ad that's all filmed with security cameras, and it's people kissing, or?
Yeah, there's like that, and then someone giving a guy food.
Yeah.
It's basically just different events that happen that they catch on the security cameras.
Yeah.
But they're not like, they're catching the good events and not the bad events.
Yeah.
I think.
Not really, were they really advertising in it?
It was probably presented as an ad, I would say, but like, cause like that would show up as pre-roll or like on YouTube, but the product wouldn't be necessarily in every single shot. It's not like they're meeting up and like sharing a Coke and like kissing about it. So that, I don't know, that would be kind of somewhere between branded content and an ad. I think that the context or the lens around it, if it was presented as a piece of branded content, then it would probably make sense. And if it was presented as an ad, it would just be like a really nice ad to look at, because you're just seeing this nice moment between people.
I compare it to that Nike example actually. That was about their brand positioning as much as that it's happiness, right? It's about open happiness, and that's just a pure example of some content that exemplifies that.
Yeah, and that's better than watching an ad of just like product, right? It's like it's telling you a bit more about the brand story and kind of reinforcing that Coke is about opening happiness and about happy moments and stuff. So it's probably a bit more pleasant to watch than a classic.
I was just going to add to that. Most of the Canadians, they did have the red fridge with the Canadian in it. They put it in different countries all over the world.
Yeah.
And only someone with a Canadian passport. I mean, I think it's kind of safe, but
yeah.
It was clear, like, it was kind of like, oh, I have a Canadian passport.
Yeah.
But it was still like the feeling. Like, I shared it on my Facebook because I was away at the time, and I was like, oh, I miss Canada, and I shared it. It's that kind of thing where, like, it was clearly like Canadian was like in every single ad. Like, it was always the fridge, people drinking it. It's kind of safe, but it was still like the heartfelt, the home feeling was there, and I think that like they did a really cool job with that. I mean, it was clearly an ad, but you did get that feeling for it.
It was a good ad.
It was good. I was like,
yeah, it was a bit like oh, like they just randomly had a Canadian passport there, and like oh, like the fridge just showed up.
It was a bit rough. Like the last shot was like it was a bit like
That's a lot of advertising there. Yeah.
No, it was kind of like they tried really hard, and there was clearly they had someone there with a Canadian passport. So like, it was a bit worse, like the last part, but they did a really good job.
We talk a lot about insight and making advertising insightful, and that's actually I think it's just a really true insight and I can testify to this. Us Canadians, I'm a Canadian, are very proud to be from Canada, and you don't see that any more clearly than when you go to an airport and you see Canadian flags on the back of bags. And what you felt about that was just so true for so many Canadians, and I think that's why it affects you, right? It just struck a chord.
And you probably could have tweaked the spot a bit and done like a Tim Hortons kind of version of that maybe, because they can play into that nationalism in Canada part of it too, because they're like the Canada coffee. So obviously you wouldn't have like coffee in a fridge and like coffee beer, but you could do like something similar to that.
A coffee machine.
A coffee machine, right? Yeah, it could be like.
Someone with a cart,
Yeah.
bagels.
And like the coffee machine doesn't work until you put your Canadian passport in.
Yeah.
We don't work in Tim Hortons, so we can't do that.
Yeah, we can't talk about that. We have Starbucks. But.
I think that's all we have time for today, but thank you so much for coming, and thank you all so much for coming as well. And feel free to grab pizza, there's still some left, and we have some bags for you on your way out as well.
All right, thanks for coming out.
Thanks.